The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. From bikes to buses, we're taking a look at some transit-related news on today's show. The RDN and BC Transit have a survey open asking about the impact of potential fare increases for trips on transit in the city. But first, you may have noticed a bunch of new e-bikes around town. The City of Nanaimo has partnered with BCAA's Evolve e-bike share to launch a bike-sharing pilot program. Since May 1st, people have been able to rent e-bikes that are stationed at 16 different parking zones across the city. For more on the program, I spoke with the person in charge of it.
My name is Leanne Buehler, and I'm the head of Evolve e-bike share and e-scooter share. It's operated by BCAA.
And how does this new bike share work? If I want to take an e-bike for a ride around Nanaimo, what do I have to do?
It's really simple. You download the Evo app, and within the app, there's a really simple e-bike registration. And once you register, you can get access to any of the e-bikes that are located around downtown Nanaimo. There's 50 e-bikes right now and about 16 different parking stations. And when you're ready to hop on a bike, you use the Evo app to find the device, unlock it, and you're ready to go. And then when you're done your trip, you bring it back to one of those parking locations and you use the Evo app again to end the trip, and then you're done.
Let's say I'm taking my bike across town, from one parking space to another, and when I get there, I find that the place I wanted to stop, the stations are all full of bikes. What happens then?
Great question. The thing about our parking zones is that the bikes don't physically lock into anything. They're just simply virtual parking spaces. So you can identify a parking space because it will have a sign, it will have a rack, it will have something to physically, visibly see that it's a parking station. But there's actually quite a bit of room in those spaces, so you will always be able to find a space to park. And so that's not going to be an issue. And one of the nice things is that these devices have swappable batteries, so they're not actually plugging into anything when you get to that space. It makes it really simple to end your trip.
So it just has to kind of be in the physical grid of the parking space as opposed to in one of, 5 limited racks?
Exactly. And when you're taking your trip, if you're kind of planning your route, you can see all of those parking zones right in the app before you even start. So if you've got a destination in mind, you can identify where that closest parking zone might be. And then if you're not trying to end your trip, if you want to take it to a coffee shop or meet a friend or run a quick errand, there is a function where you can pause your trip. It locks the bike so that nobody can take it. And then when you're done, you can hop back on that same e-bike and continue your trip and end it in that parking zone. So you've got lots of options and tons of flexibility with how you want to use the e-bike.
Can you tell me how the program has worked in preventing the bikes from being stolen or damaged?
Yeah, the devices have GPS technology, so we see where everything is all of the time, and that's what helps us do all of the great maintenance and cleaning and repairs on the devices. Theft and vandalism is rare, and they're isolated incidents. So we typically don't see that being an issue, and we haven't seen that as an issue in any of our deployments. That's how it works. And then we also have a lot of technology on the bike to physically lock itself down. So the wheels lock, the power disengages, so the bike doesn't actually move when it's in that sort of locked position.
And how do helmets work?
Yeah, there's a helmet provided with every Evolve e-bike. They are located in the basket of the e-bike, and when you see them around town, you'll see them poking out there. They're clipped in with a little clip that goes into the basket, which keeps it secure while the bike is in its parked state. And when you unlock the bike, it unlocks the clip as well so that you can use the helmet. And then when you're done your ride, you just simply clip the tag back into the basket.
And can you tell me a little bit about the pricing for this service? I know there are a few different options. There's a monthly subscription. There's an hourly rate versus a per minute rate.
Yeah. So it's 35 cents per minute and $1.25 to unlock. So that's what a single trip would cost you. However, like you mentioned, we've got hourly rates of $12.99 for anybody who's taking a longer trip. And the way that our system works is it always charges the rider the most effective rate. So if you go over that sort of 36, 37 minute threshold, it bumps into that $12.99 rate for the rest of that hour. And then we also have this membership subscription rate, which is $9.99 a month, and it reduces your permanent fee down to 10 cents. So those who are taking the bikes for, maybe a couple of times per week, if they're using it for commuting or just getting regular use out of it, the subscription rate makes that super affordable so that you can use a bike for an hour for much less.
10 cents a minute.
Those are really, 10 cents per minute. Yeah. And then we also are going to be launching in the next couple of months here something called our Inclusive Mobility Program. And what that is it's an even heavier discounted program that we offer for those with any financial barriers. And we'll be working with local organizations to identify those folks who may qualify. So if there's somebody who may already qualify for some discounted programs for transportation, that would be a great option. And the rates for that are going to be 10 cents per minute without that monthly subscription fee. So we've got a lot of ranges of different kinds of pricing that will really help make the system more affordable for folks using it frequently.
I'm curious, when you were arriving at the price, did you factor in, so in Nanaimo, the cost of a trip on the bus is $2.50 or $5 for a day pass. So even at the discounted rate, if you're going somewhere for an hour, it would still be cheaper to take the bus.
Yeah, and that's totally understandable. And sometimes the bus is going to be less expensive than an e-bike. Evolve offers a hyper-convenient mode of transportation. It's available 24/7. So when the buses may not be running or may not go to the same destination, that's a really good replacement for the bus. Evolve e-bike share works with public transportation and with other modes of transportation. So that's part of how we price the program. And then the other thing is when we're in a municipality, what we really look for is when there is a transportation gap, maybe a bus service that is less frequent or even missing parts of the city. Those are areas that we really like to look for to put e-bikes so that there is that alternative option for folks. So it just works as a really nice ecosystem with other forms of transportation in any municipality.
And I know you mentioned there are 50 bikes-ish in Nanaimo, 16 parking spaces, but I understand you have plans to expand that as soon as this summer and also plans to maybe expand to Courtenay, Comox. Can you tell me about those and some of the timelines? Sure.
So we've got a great foundation now in Nanaimo, kind of hitting all the sort of hot spots that make the program possible. And then it only expands from here. So we're searching for spots to launch at places like VIU, the hospitals, the ferries, more parks, more residential areas. Those are going to be the focus over the next couple of months to continue adding parking spots. We would anticipate our goal is to get up to maybe 25 parking spots this summer, maybe a little bit more, just to, again, make sure that ecosystem of parking zones is really convenient for folks. In terms of launching in Courtenay and Comox, that is coming up in the next few weeks to a month here. We'll have some more news to share in the coming weeks about the launch timeline and the scope. But the scope will be quite similar. We're launching with around 50 devices in that region and around the same number of parking locations to start.
I did see one kind of commenter online who was excited about the program, but raised a concern specifically about the per minute pricing and was worried that it might be kind of an incentive to go as fast as you can, and maybe that might involve some riskier behavior on the part of someone riding the bike. Is there anything you can speak to there?
Well, the bikes are speed limited, so that eliminate some of that assumption. So that bikes are speed limited to 25 kilometers an hour, which makes bike sharing a really nice alternative for folks who might not be so familiar, again, with e-bike riding. Maybe they're pedal bike riders and just transitioning to an e-bike. And it also helps just make the pathways and bike lanes safe for all. So it's quite limiting, and it's a great speed to go to get to a destination quickly without feeling like that would be an unsafe or too fast of a ride.
Can you maybe just, for people who've never ridden an e-bike, what are some of the differences?
Yeah, so what we call these e-bikes is pedal assist e-bikes. So it's not like a motorcycle or a scooter where there's throttles on the handlebars or gears or anything like that. What happens is when you hop on an e-bike and you start pedaling, the electric motor immediately kicks in after, you get up to maybe 5 kilometers an hour. So it's really at the very start. And the pedal assist adds a little extra power, maybe 50% more power than you're giving the bike. And it just feels like an effortless ride. The bikes are equipped with all the sort of basic accessories of a bike. It's got a bell so that you can communicate to other users on pathways. It's got brakes, obviously, and then the helmet in the basket. The basket can hold about 10 kilograms or so of weight, so you can put a nice sizable bag in there.
And how will you be evaluating the success of this program going forward? What are you going to be looking for?
It will be all about ridership. So what we're trying to do is create a program that people want to use. And so as we see the ridership increase through the summer and see that people are adopting it as a form of transportation, and, we're happy to say that even in the first week or so of operation, we're seeing fantastic interest and enthusiasm and ridership on the program. So we'll be monitoring if people are enjoying it and using it and making it part of their daily routine or a casual routine to get around town.
Leanne, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Leanne Bueller is head of BCAA's Evolve e-bike share.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
BC Transit and the Regional District of Nanaimo want to hear from you about potential fare changes. There's an online survey running now through May 31st, which asks about the impact of a 10 or 25 cent fare increase on routes in Nanaimo. Currently, a single trip costs $2.50, with a day pass available for $5. The survey also asks about the impact of lowering the fare on the Nanaimo-Cowichan route from $7.50 to $5. For more info on the survey and the underlying factors, I got in touch with Seth Wright at BC Transit.
I'm Seth Wright. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations at BC Transit. I work with transit systems up and down Vancouver Island, including the Regional District of Nanaimo, and it's my pleasure to work with folks in the Regional District of Nanaimo to deliver exceptional transit service to the folks from Yellow Point all the way up to Bowser.
And can you tell me what's prompting this transit fare survey for Nanaimo?
So every 5 years or so, BC Transit goes out and works with the local government to consult on what the appropriate fares. We've had fares frozen in time for a few years since the pandemic because the provincial government recognized that there was a critical need not to pull investment away from transit despite significant declines in ridership related to the pandemic and people were traveling less. But now people are getting back on the buses. We're looking significantly towards big expansions and big ideas about how we can grow ridership over the next few years. And we're looking at are we achieving the right balance between affordability and service and fare recovery?
And let's talk about some of the factors that play into that. Maybe to begin, what percentage of the cost to operate our transit system comes from the fares people pay?
So currently, we're covering about 30% of the operating costs through the fare box and through a couple other minor revenue streams. So that's pretty good. That's sort of standard with our larger transit systems across the province that we see close to that percentage, and we're pretty happy with that. And that's the number that probably makes sense to try to aim for, keeping it along those lines.
And so if it's 30% is covered by fares, where does the rest of the budget come from?
The rest comes from a mix between the province and the local government. So the RDN, through property taxes, contribute about 53% of the total bill of transit, and the province pays the balance of 47% approximately.
And you also were talking about the goal of increasing ridership there. Can you tell me where ridership is at, maybe relative to the past?
Yeah, ridership in the RDN has continued to grow. We obviously saw a dip during the pandemic, and ridership went down to close to 25-30% of pre-pandemic ridership in 2020. But we've exceeded 2019 ridership when we were on a year-over-year growth curve, and so we're doing really well. We're one of the best transit agencies in North America, first to reach that 100% pre-pandemic ridership target that we aimed for and worked towards. The RDN achieved a pretty big milestone last year of achieving 3.5 million rides across the RDN. So we're very excited about that, and some service expansions planned for this September and January of 2025 will continue to build ridership beyond that, and expansions for future years in the transit redevelopment strategy will continue to grow ridership across the region as service levels improve.
Let's talk about maybe some of the specific questions in this survey. It floats the idea of how would your transit use change if the fee changed from $250 per ride to $260 or $275. What are some of the considerations there?
So first and foremost, we're asking the public through this survey. So if you want to fill out the survey is at engage.bctransit.com/Nanaimo-fare-review. So feel free to Google it, and it should be one of the first search results, but it's the Nanaimo Fare Review. And so we're looking for the public's input. Ultimately, all decisions on fare products are made by the RDN board and their transit committee. So BC Transit will carry out this engagement and do some analysis following that, and then present some options to the RDN board and transit committee to consider and deliberate and ultimately make a decision on. We'll provide some recommendations. Those recommendations might be that we look at a 10-cent increase or a 25-cent increase according to sort of what type of response we hear from the public through the survey, and what our analysis says about where ridership is headed and where there might be appetite for increasing fare recovery and where there might not be.
How much do the results of this survey play into the decisions that get made? How much weight does this kind of have?
We certainly care a lot about what the public has, and I've heard loud and clear from the RDN board and their transit committee that they are very concerned about affordability. We're living in an age of significant inflation, and costs are rising and getting higher for everything. So we're very well attuned to that. Obviously, our costs are getting higher, and we're having to pay everyone more and pay more for parts. So we're looking at how do we keep this in balance. But ultimately, those decisions will be made at the RDN board level based on recommendations of staff, based on the public input that we hear from people.
And Nanaimo rolled out an electronic payment system for transit here late last year. How has the rollout of that gone?
Yeah, the rollout of UMO has been really great across the RDN. We've had a few blips as we implement any new system and you change any system. But overall, it's been really well received. We've had lots of people buying it and scanning their phones or using the cards to tap onto buses. The sort of overwhelming result is really positive. People were anxious to have some sort of electronic fare payment, and we're continuing to work towards the next step of UMO, which includes eventually allowing debit and credit card payment on buses. We can consider incremental increase of 10 cents, where historically we've tried to keep it on the quarter intervals, because UMO enables people to pay electronically and makes it a little bit easier than trying to have to find the dimes and nickels in your change bowl at home.
That was something I wanted to ask about. I know people can still pay with cash, but the calculus on your end for an increase from $250 to $260 changes based on the fact that now, $260 would be an incredibly awkward amount to have to find an exact change. But because of the electronic fare system, that's more possible to consider now?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen other transit systems across North America, as they move towards electronic fare, be able to increase fare on a more incremental basis and really get traction. I think you don't have to look very far. If you take the Hello Ferry or the BC ferries over to Vancouver and go to TransLink, you'll see fares that are all over the place in terms of intervals and increments of change. But because there's electronic fare payments, it's not an issue, and it's pretty straightforward. And I think it's tap and go. I enjoyed a trip over there this last weekend, and it was wonderfully easy.
Also raised in the survey is the Nanaimo-Cowichan intercity route. Right now it costs $7.50 per trip. There's floated in the survey the idea of, how would your use of this change if it were $5 per trip? Could you tell me about that route and maybe its current ridership and what the considerations are?
Yeah, so the Nanaimo-Cowichan route is an awesome route that was just introduced about a year ago or a year and a half ago now, between downtown Duncan or the Cowichan Valley and Nanaimo, and provides a direct service about 8 times a day between the two destinations. That route's seen some ridership growth, and we've had some good feedback. One of the pieces of feedback we've heard on that route is that the fares are just a little bit too high at $7.50. So there have been suggestions, and we've heard both from the Cowichan Valley Board, who co-funds it with the RDN Board, that there's a desire for seeing reduced fare on that particular route. So we're consulting folks on whether it might be more appealing if the fare was $5 or $6 instead of $7.50 as it is currently.
And can you maybe tell me about the idea of BC Transit as a service to connect people between communities on the island? Where could I, as a person in Nanaimo, go on the island just using kind of BC Transit buses, and where are there still gaps?
Yeah, so we're working closely with local governments up and down Vancouver Island at conversations. We're in preliminary stages in some. We're working actively on expansions in others to enhance connectivity. And we're getting lots of calls and lots of requests and interest in enhancing connectivity in an affordable way. Currently, we have good connectivity between Nanaimo and Victoria. And if you want to spend the day in Victoria on a weekday, that is quite easy. Or even on a Saturday, you can do that through transit. We are looking at connectivity to Comox Valley, and will be pursuing expansions to support some connectivity with the Comox Valley this year, in this coming year. And then we're having conversations in a preliminary stage with the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District about establishing a connection between the RDN and Port Alberni right now through an active survey that we're carrying out.
Off the top, you talked about, part of the consideration here is looking to expand transit services. One piece of that would be what you just talked about in expanding connections between different communities on the island. What about within Nanaimo specifically? What are the plans to increase transit service in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. The RDN's transit redevelopment strategy is a really bold vision for service expansion. It encompasses a 55% increase in annual service hours and an 86% increase in the total number of buses. Those buses and those service hours are really dedicated towards building a real hierarchy of routes. So it would create a new Route 1 that's based on the existing rapid route, but would be on the Old Island Highway corridor principally, and provide really fast north-south connections throughout the city. And then there's a number of other pieces that take the existing routes and really enhance them and build them up to a higher service level so that they can provide better quality service across the entire regional district. It requires significant vision. It requires some capital improvements to be able to carry it out. We're working very closely with RDN staff on being able to implement this vision, and super excited about what it presents for the communities across the RDN.
Are there any considerations to adding transit service to Duke Point, especially as BC Ferries kind of favors that over the Departure Bay route?
Yeah, absolutely. So Duke Point service expansion is identified in the transit redevelopment strategy. It's identified as a year 3 expansion. So it's something that we in the RDN are working towards. It requires us to establish that rapid line route down to Southgate Plaza, down in the south end of Nanaimo. And that expansion would enable us to establish a Duke Point route between the Southgate Plaza and Duke Point as a year 3 expansion. So as we move forward with expansion in the coming years, well, that year 3 target may shift a little bit, but that's sort of where it fits in the overall plan and where we're working towards.
Is there anything else you think it's important to let people know about how to have their voice heard on transit in Nanaimo?
I think right now the best opportunity is to go online and fill out the survey. Let us know what you think about the fares and the possibility of some changing fare products, and continue to keep an ear open to what else is happening within the RDN's transit system. There's certainly lots going on, and we're working towards delivering on that bold vision.
Seth, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Joe. Thank you.
Seth Wright is the Senior Manager of Government Relations at BC Transit. The transit fare survey that prompted our discussion is available online until May 31st. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.